So, a lot of you might be asking at this point, how do you range ride, Daniel? That doesn't make any sense. You've explained nothing really. So, let's talk a little bit about specific methodology. The main way I do this and go about this that I've learned over my stint of time doing this is to really first assess what's going on the ground, first off. And you do this well before any livestock's in place, right? A lot of the times cattle are put out in allotments, public land grazing allotments, or private land, without actually doing, in my opinion, what's called proper reconnaissance. And that's going out there and assessing what's going on the ground with predators specifically prior to any kind of livestock being out on the ground. And you can really get ahead of the game in that. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Anybody that's with animals or works with them or has a dog knows that if I can prevent him from eating a golf ball, it's much easier than doing surgery. So when I'm out there by myself, or whether I have a team, the methodology is pretty much the same. So I'll just explain it from the point of view of just myself and my team of 3 Dobermans and the horses that I ask to work for me and with me. So we stay out there for long stints of time, and the whole point of that is to actually become part of that landscape. So we know cattle behavior, we know the predator behavior, and with that knowledge and the knowledge of knowing that behavior is the first indicator that something's going on, that something's off. If we have cows in a way weird area, or if the wolves have totally switched gears and they're doing something else, we know that something's up. And we can intervene in a better and more appropriate way at that time and kind of just basically on the ground guide the process instead of just putting cattle out there in June, not seeing anything until October, and then wondering what's going on, or going out there to check occasionally and just finding a huge train wreck of the situation, like dead cows or something like that. And that's something that we're trying to avoid with this work. Being out there on that daily basis is integral. It's a huge portion of the work. So we know what's going on when it's going on. We don't know what happened later. We're not getting backlogged information. There's no lag time. We're actually a part of that. So by assessing what's going on the ground, by utilizing just boots on the ground mentality and assessing animal sign and seeing how we best as range riders can fit into play and protect that livestock and protect the intrinsic right for those predators to be on the landscape, it's just the best tool of coexistence that I've found and that a lot of people have found so far. So human presence is the main tool in my toolbox as a range rider that I utilize, and there's a lot more in there, and constantly trying to develop new tools to put in that toolbox. But we'll talk about human presence first, because that's the main thing. And that's basically directly overlapping your presence with the presence of the cattle and when the predators are most active and most apt to be hunting. So a quick example is, let's say you have a herd sleeping out there at night of 30 cattle out in the middle of an open field on some grazing allotment or in wooded area. It doesn't really matter at that point. You're going to guard those animals, and the most crucial time to guard those animals are when those predators that potentially would pose a threat to them would be active and hunting. So if I'm out there and those wolves come up and they're like, okay, they see this herd, and then they see this big goofy looking guy on a horse making sounds like that in the background, and having dogs bark like that, I mean, it's an intense experience, and it immediately stacks the risk to gain ratio in the wrong way for those wild animals. So wildlife operate on a really, when it comes down to it, I don't want to say simple, but very predictable pattern of risk to gain. So they need water, they need food, they need shelter. They basically constantly have to assess, what is the risk that I have to put into this? Is it death? Is it a broken limb? Is it something else, something more traumatic? Is it just a simple, like, I might be seen by somebody, no big deal. They have to assess that too. What am I gaining? So we go back to that example of these wolves in the edge of this meadow, and there's cattle in this meadow, and there's a potential right now that if those wolves go in there and they flush that herd, that they're going to actually obviously cause stress to that herd, no matter if they don't even succeed by actually hunting one of those animals. But there's a high likelihood that they might actually succeed in hunting one of those animals. That's why they're going after cattle in the first place. It's a learned behavior. It's something that they actually won't do until they realize, wait, this is kind of easy, and a lot of people aren't out here watching me, and I can just go for this animal that's kind of slow, versus like this elk that's very adept at moving through the foliage at high speeds and is very adept at defending themselves with their hooves. And cattle generally aren't as adept, even though they have definitely natural defensive mechanisms that they utilize. They're just easier prey, and it's an easier option for those wolves to take. So here comes me, cute, crazy-looking guy on horseback with giant hair, and which really helps. It's a deterrent in itself. So cue me coming in during these times that they're very active. Wolves are crepuscular animals. If you don't know that term, it's similar to nocturnal or diurnal. So nocturnal is animals that are active at night. Diurnal are animals that are active during the day. Crepuscular animals are animals that are active primarily during the times of dawn and dusk. So wolves are crepuscular animals, and that's one of their best times to hunt. And that's when a lot of ungulates, their vision, their vision is much different than a predator's vision than human vision, definitely. Stereoscopic vision is much different than eyes on the side, real wide. But anyways, so they take advantage of that, and they go and hunt during these times. So again, here cue me coming in when these ungulates, these cows, are very vulnerable potentially, and these wolves are potentially going to look at this as a food source that they can maybe take advantage of, and they don't know that yet in this scenario, let's say. So I come in, I act as a buffer basically between that predator and these cattle in this example that I'm setting up for you. So how you do that sometimes is just human presence. Just being there will be enough to scare them a lot of the times. Sometimes I've had to physically charge animals, and that's pretty scary in itself. You've seen it in like Braveheart, the movie. I mean, those camera angles with the horse coming at you and a big person on it, it's an intense experience, especially when you're a wild animal and not accustomed to seeing that kind of thing on a daily basis. I've actually had to utilize rubber bullets for certain situations. Pyrotechnics sometimes, biological deterrents, such as putting up wolf urine, establishing like a biological fence that says, hey, there's already a pack here. Again, there's lots of tools in the toolbox that really kind of aid in this whole way of trying to find a way to stack that risk up so that it's just too expensive and they won't look at it as the most advantageous path to take that day. So if we can do that, they will just naturally go back to their natural prey base, look at that, and go, hey, nobody's guarding these deer or these elk, let's go for that, and continue on life as it should be. So besides acting as a buffer between predators and livestock, a lot of my job is obviously assessing cattle health and behavior, making sure they're doing well while they're on the landscape. Pull animals that are unhealthy so they don't potentially attract predators. If an animal happens to unfortunately pass away, we pull those bodies, we dispose them in a proper way. And that's called like the sanitation effect that we're doing. We're kind of trying to basically minimize any kind of attractants that are going to pull in predators to active cattle operations. If we can prevent that and make sure that there's no like real big super attractants there for them, again, there's just not enough gain in that equation for them to go past that risk wall that we've set up to actually accomplish that goal. So they go, that's not worth it. I want to go chase this elk or this deer that doesn't have somebody guarding them. I'm pretty sure I can catch it. It's not behind enemy lines, so to speak. So it's not your typical 9 to 5 by any means, so there's no typical day. I don't know what's going to happen even when I'm in the middle of sleep. I've been woken up before by wolf howls in the middle of a herd that I know, and I've got to go out there in the middle of the night. And again, that attests to that methodology of staying out there is it's a huge, crucial part of how I approach this. And that's a huge difference in how most people are approaching this currently in the state that I'm working in, at least, and that's Washington State.